All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Me here today, talking about real music in real time for some real people out there just like you right there, just like me right here. All right, Killer Kings, baby. Came out last year, fantastic. I think it hit my top 3 for the year. That's how much I liked Killer Kings. I tried to share this with a few people, and they're like, yeah, I don't know about the singer. He's kind of different, and I like different. He's kind of like a bit David Coverdale-ish. He's a little rough around the edges, which I think makes this project really cool. Melodic rock, Queen, especially the guitar work, very Queen-like. That's where I think they got the whole Killer Kings name, because it's like Killer Queen, Killer King. All right, you probably get that, right? What else? White Snake, which I mentioned, and Journey. Of course, everything sounds like Journey, Dave. Well, anyway, speaking of Journey, right? Gregg Rolie recently has been used as a prop or a piñata, depending on how you look at it. Gregg is minding his own business, probably thinking to himself, it's Journey's 50th anniversary. It'd be cool maybe to play a gig with Neil again. He's probably thinking about Neil, not thinking about John. And I don't think John's thinking about Gregg. But it seems as though maybe things are turning a corner, but all of this is publicity. It's just going back and forth. This is a narrative. Narrative is so important these days. People create their own narratives. That's why you have this term called fake news. It's fake news that there's a second objector who doesn't want Gregg. I think it's fake. It might be fake news that there's a second person that doesn't want Gregg to be there. I totally understand why John doesn't want Gregg there, because it would upstage John. And Team Sean has put out a lot of information. It may be accurate. I'm not questioning the information, but it's narrative building. Let's create a narrative and let's make sure that people hear about it and spread the word. And that RMO guy, he's going to do a video again, and 5 other channels are going to do videos because it's good. It's good for my channel, like I keep saying. However, I kind of feel bad for Gregg Rolie, right? And Gregg Rolie left Journey, I think, what, in 1980? I think Departure was out, and I think he announced that he was done not too long after that. Departure, Captured, and then Escape comes out. And the band was on that upward trajectory into the superstardom area. And that's with Gregg Rolie in the band. You can ask anybody who lived through that, and they're going to tell you, yeah, there was a buzz that this band was going to break a lot bigger. And people will say they brought Kane in, and Perry and Kane, they really clicked, and they wrote ballads, and really very syrupy ballads. And Neil probably didn't want those ballads, but agreed to it once he saw how the fan base changed. A lot of women were showing up. So it was a big success in that regard for Journey, but it was a huge departure, sorry, had to use that word, from what they had been, even with Gregg and Steve in the band. Gregg and Steve, there was this tension there because Gregg Rolie, here's this Santana guy who's progressive and eclectic and jazz fusion-ish and just leans on the Hammond B3 organ like nobody's business. And you're bringing this other sound in. So there was definitely a conflict there. But it wasn't just the musical conflict. We learn in an article sent to me by a loyal patron by the name of Robbie B. Now, Robbie sent me this, and I read it, and I was like, holy crap, Batman. This explains everything. And it's also very counterintuitive to the rock and roll world. It's like Suzanne DeYoung, Dennis DeYoung's wife, who has stuck by her man for all these years and was an inspiration for all of those million-selling Styx records that the other boys don't want to play anymore because they know, hey, he's going to write another song about his wife and it's going to go to #1, or it's going to be a top 10, or it's going to be a hit when no one expected it to be a hit, kind of a thing. In the case of Gregg Rolie, he's been married probably more than the 36 years because this came out in 2018. Hopefully he's still married to his wife, Rolie. But this is kind of a storybook thing. And the rock music industry isn't about long-term marriage. It's not about, fidelity. It's about infidelity. Hence, you had an album called High Infidelity by REO Speedwagon because everybody was cheating on everybody. And it was great, great fodder, great lyrics for an album. Same thing, obviously, with Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. It's an album about breaking up and getting back together and finding a new love and all this stuff. It's good material. And we all grew up listening to this stuff. But the long-term effects of this on the culture, I think, is starting to, or it's been taking its toll now for more than a generation, at least. But the story of Gregg and Rolie is worth talking about because you're not going to see this in your ordinary rock publication. Now, Rolie, she writes children's books, and she looks like America's sweetheart. There's a picture of her, and she does. She looks like somebody who would just be a small-town girl, literally a small-town girl. Not living in a lonely world, but you know what I'm saying. So anyway, the life of being married to a musician is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. This is an article from BizX magazine, which I've never heard of before. From the tour bus rides to the long flights, it's truly a life spent in perpetual motion, a life that Rolie never would have expected to find herself in the midst of. It all began in the mid-'70s during two-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee Gregg Rolie's time in the world-renowned band Journey. Now, this article looks like it might have come out right after Gregg was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for a second time. And again, there's one side out there, Team Sean, that has spilled the beans on the fact that Gregg was not really wanted on stage during that ceremony. Steve Perry didn't want to be there, and they were trying to keep Gregg from actually being there. And by the way, I heard this rumor a couple of years ago from a very, very reliable source. I'll put it that way. Very reliable. That they were trying to keep Gregg from being on stage, which is nuts. Yeah, Gregg, you can accept your award, but you got to be over here. You can do the pre-show ceremony. We'll give you the award. Just, you can't hang out with these guys, which is just lunacy, right? So anyway, Gregg's wife, Rolie, was working as an airline stewardess at the time and first met Gregg while sitting in an airport lounge next to the band waiting for her flight. This is just a great story. Rather than some of the, I don't want to go there, but the way the groupies show up, right? And then they become the wives. And again, the whole airplane thing, yeah, John Cain, the airplane, there's some similarities there, right, with his current wife. But I don't know if it happened that way prior to this. Anyway, it goes on. This is a much better story. You could write a book about this story because it's that good. In an industry where your art, your life, and your loves are disposable and gone in an instant, this couple truly defy the odds, not only through their 36-year strong marriage, but also by building their lives with love, respect, and trust away from the critical eye of the paparazzi and the public alike. So how is Gregg Rolie's wife and mother of his children, plus living in a world, here comes a run-on sentence, where he's known for not one but two bands, Santana and Journey, that have made significant contributions to the music around the world, does she contend with his fame and still be herself? Anyway, she writes children's books. Meme's Little World. She created her own place. She illustrates and writes these books. I think this is awesome. Anyway, they ask her, what advice would you give women that are in a relationship with a musician? If you're truly grounded in your marriage and you don't have trust issues and you know who you are as a woman, you're good. But know that's a profession that requires a lot of attention, and you have to step back and let that happen. A lot of women don't understand sharing their husbands with the public and the fans, in some cases with groupies, sorry, and it's all about the fans. Without those fans, we would not have the beautiful life we do. Gregg left Journey at its peak. This is a question. For a number of reasons, people would be surprised to know that having a family was the main one. Full stop. Gregg Rolie left Journey to have a family. That is the number one reason. Lori says, when I married Gregg, I was fortunate enough to go on the road full time with Journey, and we had the time of our lives. It was fabulous. It was like a fairy tale. It was Gregg who decided he had had enough of the years of touring with Santana and Journey, and he was tired. They toured like no other band. Thanks, Herbie Herbert. It's true. I mean, they were trying to make as much money as they could, and they did. She goes on to say they rarely had days off. He was very tired, and he knew he wanted to get married and have children. He did not want to raise children on the road. According to Jonathan Cain, the road is no place to start a family. Sorry, I had to throw that in. I felt the same way. She felt just the same way. Okay, I got to stop doing this. He was thinking about it a long time and quit the band to raise a family, and that's what he did. Okay, so full stop again. So Gregg Rolie, okay, he was tired of the road, and you can't raise a family on the road. So this is almost like a precursor to Jonathan Cain writing Faithfully. It's funny because maybe he got the idea from this situation. Maybe he had heard that, hey, Gregg is going to go and start a family because the road is no place to start a family. It's really cool that Gregg Rolie had it both ways. And he becomes like super respectable, like off the charts, out of the screen, respectable. To do that, it took about 17 years, it says here, for Gregg to go back out there. He spent all of that time with his family. Now, I think he recorded some stuff, a couple of solo albums. I mean, I'm sure he was doing stuff where he could still be home. The Gringo album that he did in the 80s is spectacular. Go listen to that. Just amazing record. And then The Storm. They talk about The Storm, which after Journey broke up, I'm sure Gregg thought to himself, heck, we can do this. We don't need Steve Perry. And he found Kevin Chalfant, who was in 707, amazing singer. And Kevin happens to be a Christian too, which is interesting. But anyway, Gregg had it both ways. And the real reason he leaves Journey is to actually start a family. Now, some will say, well, he also was tired of the road, which he says here. And in one article that I read, he kind of knew the writing was on the wall with Steve Perry. He's like, I used to sing every song in this band. I don't really expect to sing every song in this band anymore. But Herbie had zeroed in on Steve Perry, and for good reason. But you can't really beat those feeling that way anytime just the same way moments that these two guys had. They didn't have enough of those. They should have really built more music around both of those voices because the contrast was amazing and it made the music interesting. It wasn't as predictable with just Steve singing. So I find this to be a great article. It's in BizX magazine, and it's Memes Little World Rocks. Those are the books that Rolie writes, and nobody in the rock media is going to do a story about Gregg Rolie like this, especially on the 50th anniversary. It's way more interesting to focus on the train wreck that is the battle between Sean and Cain. And, you know, especially after reading this, John Cain with his, and this kind of goes into that Team Sean narrative about, hey, if you really care about spirituality, then you should honor Gregg Rolie. Well, yeah, not only that, if you really care about family, you wrote a song about this called Faithfully, and this is faithfully demonstrated. In fact, he gave up all of that stuff to go and do a far more important thing than, you know, being in a rock band and being told how great you are every day, having your ego stroked. Gregg knows he's great. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, okay? He knows he's great. The fans love Gregg Rolie. And yeah, he should definitely be back with Journey. And if he wanted to be back permanently, I would say, hey, step aside and let him back. Much like Steve Perry, step aside. You know, Gregg is 75 years old, and I have a hunch he doesn't want to be out there on the road, you know, at this age as much, although he did a pretty good stint with Ringo Starr. And I think that even raised his profile more, and it reminded people of how great a musician he is and how much of a team player he can be. You know, to step aside and let Steve Perry essentially just take over the band and then recommend your replacement and have your replacement go on to get maybe a little bit more publicity, but people never forgot about Gregg Rolie. And this article is just a terrific reminder about what's truly important. Nice work, Gregg Rolie and Lori. Lori seems like a great woman. Hopefully they're still married. This would stink because this would really stink because this came out like 5 years ago. Anyway, Killer Kings, want to show this one more time. Burn for Love, a tremendous melodic rock album. Yeah, they're still making this stuff, and I'll be talking about it in 2023. I haven't figured out what my album of the month is for January as of yet. There are some new releases coming, so, you know, I would like to just promote one album each month and then maybe talk about a specific song on that record, or several songs, just so people know that it's not just a one-hit wonder kind of thing, although nobody's going to play this music. So it's up to me to determine what the one hit on the album should be. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. I've had a lot of great feedback over this past weekend. I had two Christian church pastors join Patreon and send me really heartfelt messages, and I was completely blown away by that. I am an imperfect work in progress, as always, and I make mistakes, but I like what I do, and that's why I keep doing it. The world is going crazy, and I'll still be talking about that. I didn't see anything too weird over the weekend, and so I'm not going to jump to any crazy conclusions, because that's the other side, always saying, you know, just keep your powder dry. Well, we need to talk about the truth, and transparency could completely cure any crazy tinfoil hat speculation if you had transparency. And that's what's happening right now, is that people are being censored, banned, and or blocked, same thing, for telling the truth about things, or at least just expressing an alternative viewpoint, which I will continue to do. You know, I tend to censor myself and use code language. It's worked for a couple of years, so I'm going to continue doing it. Even though I think that dam is beginning to break when it comes to information, because I think on Friday I saw something in a very mainstream publication that kind of shocked me, that they were questioning the efficacy of a certain thing, right? Because of certain things that are happening out there. All right, so I've gone way too long on this video. Thanks again, folks, and I will see you soon.